Now, with that being said, let's address when you want to check your blood sugar. Generally speaking, your diabetes educator will ultimately determine the best times for you specifically. Again, this is because mixing timing of medication is somewhat complicated. However, there's some general rules of thumb as to when people will check their blood sugar. This can include right before a meal, 2 hours after a meal, before going to bed, upon waking up, also before physical activities, just to make sure you need some extra calories before you start expending energy. And to that point, during and after moderate to intense physical activity is also very important, at least in the beginning stages, to check your blood sugar so you don't pass out from low blood sugar. Also, if you get a hunch that your blood sugar might be too low, too high, currently falling, also see if your hunch is correct, but definitely check. That way you get to know your body. And also when you're sick or under stress, your metabolism is a little bit different, and sometimes other medications you may be taking are also affecting your blood sugar directly. There are a number of ways you can record your blood sugars. Here's an example. It's modeled off of John Hopkins educational material. As you can see, the days are on the column. Then we have all 3 meals, a column for before and after each meal, bedtime, and in the morning. That's just an example. Also, a suggestion I have is to write down how you feel every time you take a glucose measurement. That will also help you get attuned to how you feel with certain levels of blood sugar. The more frequently you do it, you will start seeing a pattern. So what numbers are we aiming for? Now this is, you don't have to memorize this. Eventually you will. I also suggest to keep this nearby next to your glucometer to have numbers to generally aim for. Again, these numbers are not, they are ranges because the goal varies for every individual based on the severity of their diabetes, how long they have had it, and is best determined by, again, their diabetes educator or diabetes clinician team. So when testing at home, you have 3 different types of categories. There's fasting blood glucose, which is what you're going to get in the morning. Your range, generally is 90 to 100 milligrams per deciliter. Before meals, blood sugar will likely be on a lower end because you've been moving around, you've been active, been burning calories. That's a slightly lower value of 70 to 130. And then 2 hours after eating, you can expect a slightly higher range. For diabetics, it's 140 to 180. Basically anything under 180 is good. And you could see for non-diabetics, the number is a lot lower. It's 80 to 130. The goals are slightly different for when you are diabetic, and it is a gradual process to continually lower your blood sugars. When you go to your clinic, they will test hemoglobin A1C, which essentially gauges your long-term blood sugar control. So it is a percent, and it takes, you could look at it as an average of the last 3 months of your blood sugars and how they look. Anything under 7% for diagnosed diabetics would be considered good glycemic control. So, what raises your blood sugars? Carbohydrates. We've all heard the term. These are foods that consist mostly of starch or sugar. They are meant to give your body energy. So they can affect your glucose in a number of ways. The amount of carbohydrates you eat will affect your blood sugar rising, and also the source of these carbohydrates also affects the speed at which your blood sugar rises and even the amount. So the ultimate goal is to limit the amount of carbohydrates and pick the right types to control your blood sugar. And I will explain how this is done as we proceed. The type and the quality of the carbohydrates that you choose to eat really matters. Eating well can make you feel like you have control over diabetes and eventually will help you gain control over your diabetes. To keep things straightforward, we will categorize carbohydrates into two main categories: simple, which is the bad ones, and complex, which are the good ones. Simple is anything that is pure sugar or refined white flour, so candy, soda, fruit juices, as well as pretty much every dessert, cakes, cookies, and white breads. Complex carbohydrates are considered the good ones, which consist mostly of whole grain breads and vegetables. So your goal is to strive to eat mostly complex carbohydrates. They take longer to digest, so they keep you full longer. They also prevent your blood sugar from bouncing all over the place, going up and down, and instead there's a slow, controlled release of sugar into the blood, which helps with maintaining sustained energy. The other good thing about complex carbohydrates is that they contain lots of fiber. Fiber is also carbohydrate, however, it has no calories and does not raise your blood sugar. Some other benefits of fiber is that it lengthens time of digestion of the food you eat, it keeps your bowels regular, and it cleans out the digestive tract. So essentially, all of your carbohydrates in a perfect world should be complex. Obviously, that's not always possible. Strive for them to be the majority. If you are in the very beginning stages of changing your dietary habits and that seems like a little too much for you, your goal initially should be make 50% of your carbohydrates complex and work your way up from there. So here are quite a few examples of complex carbohydrates. This is by far not the whole list. This is just an example. Basically, the most obvious complex carbohydrates are whole grain breads. And by breads, basically, I mean also pastas, oats, crackers, brown rice. Then there's the legumes category: beans, lentils, peas, corn, tortillas. The tricky thing is that things like bread, pasta, crackers, those can be both whole grain or refined white flour. So when you buy these products, make sure to look at the box and make sure it says the word whole grain on the box, and also make sure that's the first ingredient. Most vegetables are complex carbohydrates. This can include anything from leafy greens, which are mostly fiber, to sweet potatoes and squash, which are more substantial, but they also have fiber and vitamins in them. Fresh fruit and berries are also considered complex carbohydrates. Those are better not to overdo because they do have more sugar than vegetables and breads, but because they have fiber and vitamins and minerals, they are in that category. Basically, straying away from carbohydrates for a second, protein is also an extremely important nutrient to get with all of your meals. It also helps make you feel full longer, and it's important for creating body tissues and a lot of vital organ functions. So as you can see right here, this is a general example of what a plate would look like. It's an average 9-inch plate. You have vegetables at 50%, carbohydrates at 25%, and protein also at 25%. This is quite different than what it used to like when 50%, I believe, was either carbohydrates or protein. To limit or completely avoid, we have the simple carbohydrates. These, more often than not, are empty calories. They have no nutritional value. Some other downsides is that eating these foods most likely makes you hungry very quickly after you eat, which is definitely not the goal of eating in general. You want to stay full, and also foods that behave that way also can skyrocket your blood sugar and then have them fall just as quickly as they rose. So examples of simple carbohydrates are those white or refined breads and cereals. Desserts, cookies, cakes, pastries, donuts, candy, juices. Even if it's 100% juice, you're better off eating a whole fruit with fiber. And then sodas and other sugary drinks. I did put white potatoes in this category just because to limit that amount. Those can potentially fall into the complex carbohydrate, but not. I would stay away from looking at it that way. In general, you want to remove dessert as an expectation that it's always part of a meal. It's not supposed to be that way. Sweets are occasional, and you would be surprised that sometimes that little sweet craving at the end of the meal could be satisfied by a piece of fruit or just waiting it out. How you eat is also very important in terms of timing. Eating too much food of any kind, carbohydrates, calories in general, will make things worse for you. The goal is to eat small and frequent meals. One way to answer the question of how small is small, try to think of it as eat till you're full but not stuffed. So don't look at the portions as this is what I must eat. Eat till you feel generally satiated. Because the issue is that the more food you eat, the more insulin your body needs to produce. And as I discussed earlier in the presentation, the more insulin you produce, the harder it is to control your blood sugars and hunger, because sometimes the body doesn't respond. Sometimes the insulin, you produce too much insulin and it lowers your blood sugars more than you would have wanted to. So basically, small meals are the safer way to go, and they will automatically limit how much sugar your body has to break down at one time. So the goal here is not to overburden your digestive system and your endocrine system, which is what produces the insulin. With timings, you want to spread eating pretty as evenly as possible throughout the day to keep your blood sugars from falling. Do not wait too long between meals, because that's what the result will be. And the plus side of eating this way is that small, frequent meals can lead you to automatically eat less and may benefit in some weight loss while you're at it. So don't forget to consistently attend the clinics and screenings that you're prescribed to attend to keep a pulse on your condition. A 30-minute seminar is a nice reminder of things, but it won't ultimately be what keeps you on track with checking your blood sugars and making sure they are under control. The journal, the records that we discussed earlier of how to write down your blood sugars, is also something that is very important to take to your appointments, because your diabetes educator, which is again that nurse, pharmacist, dietitian, they will look at your numbers and they will be able to tell you, how much, if maybe you should eat a little bit less or eat more frequently. They will also, more importantly, make sure that you are prescribed the proper dosing of medications, not too much, not too little. Another thing to keep in mind is keep tabs on your mental health. This is very important. Diabetes is not an easy condition to navigate. It is something that is with you on a daily basis. And if you find that you're overwhelmed and stressed out, address this issue as soon as possible. The medical team does expect this, and they are here to help. Poor mental health will often lead to poor eating habits, and the poor eating habits will unfortunately ruin all of your hard work. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation. The floor is now open to any and all questions. Here are my references. And after questions, we are going to do a few interactive activities. We're going to play a game of spotting high or low blood sugars, and also discerning between simple and complex carbohydrates. And I also have a few additional handouts to supplement this presentation, which we will proceed with right now. All right, we are now open to questions.